Welcome to the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. This is our 83rd episode. Today is Thursday, December 16th, 2021. My name is Andy Zee, and I'm coming to you this week as last from New York City at Revolution Books in Harlem, New York. And I'm here with Sunsara Taylor, my co-host.
That's right. And I'm coming to you from Los Angeles, California. Later in the episode, we are going to bring you an excerpt from one of the speeches of Bob Avakian, the revolutionary leader and developer of a whole new framework of human emancipation, the new communism. We're also going to bring you an important interview on the abortion rights emergency. We'll introduce those segments and tell you more about what's in this episode a little later. But first, our most important segment of the day, where we're going to begin, is to announce to you and to the world the release of a major new work at RevCom.us. It is called Something Terrible or Something Truly Emancipating: Profound Crisis, Deepening Divisions, the Looming Possibility of Civil War, and the Revolution That Is Urgently Needed. A Necessary Foundation, a Basic Roadmap for This Revolution, by Bob Avakian, revolutionary leader, author of The New Communism. This is a major work. It's available now at RevCom.us. You can read it there. You can listen to the audio from Bob Avakian delivering this. You can print it out as a PDF, but get into it. In a few minutes, I'm going to bring you edited excerpts of an interview, a conversation that I was able to host between two leaders of the National Revolution Tour, two followers of Bob Avakian. But before we go there, we want to play you the opening few minutes of this talk to let you hear from Bob Avakian directly. Let's listen.
Something terrible or something truly emancipating? Profound crisis, deepening divisions, the looming possibility of civil war, and the revolution that is urgently needed. A necessary foundation, a basic roadmap for this revolution. By Bob Avakian, revolutionary leader, author of The New Communism. In the course of this talk, I will be referring to and digging further into key points that are put forward in two very important documents which are featured on our website, revcom.us. A declaration, a call to get organized now for a real revolution, and an article of mine following up on that declaration and call. This is a rare time when revolution becomes possible. Why that is so, and how to seize on this rare opportunity. So, for everyone getting into this talk, everyone who cares about the crucial questions it is speaking to, it is also important to take up or return to and get deeply into those documents as well, and to go regularly to revcom.us and watch the weekly YouTube show, Revolution Nothing Less, both of which sharply illustrate why a real revolution is urgently needed and is possible, what are the goals of this revolution, and how to be part of building for this revolution. What I will be speaking to here is, as the title says, a necessary foundation and a basic roadmap for this revolution. One other point. I am going to say what needs to be said about the way things are, why they are that way, where things are headed, and what needs to be done to radically change this in a positive way. And as part of that, I am going to bluntly speak some truth that is bound to offend some people. I do this because the stakes in all this are so high, and, to refer to a line from Bob Dylan, the hour is getting late, and there is no time to speak falsely now. But I do this not out of a sense that people are so deeply caught up in that they cannot break with ways of thinking and acting which serve to perpetuate their own oppression and degradation, and that of others as well. No, I am doing this precisely out of the understanding that masses of people not only need to, but can make a profound break with this, that they can radically change themselves as part of and in the process of radically changing the world in an emancipating way. So let's get to it. Here is the heart of the matter. Many people, including someone like Martin Luther King, have argued that attempting to carry out a revolution to overthrow this system is suicidal, particularly for Black people in this country, when in fact, Black people and masses of other oppressed and exploited people profoundly and desperately need this revolution. The reality is that such a revolution can succeed, but this is possible, particularly up against powerful ruling forces like in this country, only in rare times and circumstances. And here is a very important truth. This is one of those rare times and circumstances. This rare time must not be wasted, squandered, thrown away. Rather, revolution must be actively prepared for and vigorously, consistently worked for, now and in an ongoing way, to build up the scientifically oriented and powerfully organized forces for and to prepare the ground for this revolution.
That was the voice of Bob Avakian in the opening few minutes of this profound new work that has just been released at revcom.us. A moment ago, I said we were going to talk with two leaders of the National Get Organized for an Actual Revolution Tour, two followers of Bob Avakian, about the significance of this talk, inviting you into it and to the work of taking it up. The first of these people you know well. He is the host, Andy Zee, of the RNL show. And also with us to get into this is Lenny Wolff. Welcome to the Revolution Nothing Less show.
Hello, Sunsara. Hi, Andy. Good to see you.
To get us started, Lenny, I wanted to ask you if you could just react to the first few minutes that we heard. And in particular as well, the main title of this work, Something Terrible or Something Truly Emancipating.
Every time I hear it, something strikes me a little differently. And this time I've fixed on the quote from the Bob Dylan song, "Let us not speak falsely now, the hour is getting late." And both of those things run through this talk. The hour is getting late. That's the speaks to the something terrible that people do broadly see around them. The something truly emancipating is what people do not see around them. It's what you need the science that Bob Avakian has brought forward to see underneath the real, to see into the real dynamics, the real conflicts that are driving things forward. But if we don't speak the truth, if we speak falsely, then we will squander what we have in front of us. This talk speaks the truth. There's not a false word in it. It's provocative. It goes at everything that's holding people back from revolution and from the standpoint of needing to make revolution to actually deal with the situation we face.
Andy, I want to read something that is in Bob Avakian's piece, This is a Rare Time When Revolution Becomes Possible, why that is so, and how to seize on this rare opportunity. We've cited it a number of times on this show, and BA quotes it again in this new piece. And I'm going to read a quote from it and let you respond. He says, "These divisions among the ruling powers and in the larger society cannot be resolved within the framework that has existed and has held things together for nearly 150 years, since shortly after the end of the Civil War, which led to the abolition of slavery. They cannot be resolved on the basis of the capitalist democracy, which has been the normal means of capitalist rule, really dictatorship, for so long." Andy?
Well, yeah, just a few pages later in that work, and it's cited again here, that the country, these deep divisions in the conflict cannot be overcome, cannot be put back together on the terms and the way the country has been ruled up to now. So that's up for grabs now. You can ignore that, and many people are, or you can deal with it. Bob Avakian is getting to you straight in this thing. There's no bullshit here. He's going right to the truth, as Lenny said. He's going right to that hard truth that we are facing either a radical resolution on violent terms, either reactionary violence and murderous oppression, which is what this whole Trumpist fascist Republican Party means, or it can be resolved through an actual revolution. And the fact that there is this conflict gives rise to that. And see, here's what nobody else recognizes, that in this extreme negative situation, there is a potential for something positive. Why? Because the situation is going to be so extreme, so revealing of the actual nature of things, that if there is a force out there who has gotten deeply into the work of Bob Avakian, including this work as a very key document for this moment in history, then, and that puts forward there is a way out of this horror, there is a way out of this madness, and organizes on that basis, then there is the possibility of, rather than a horrible future, almost unthinkable in where it's going, including the fate of humanity hangs in whether or not we're able to resolve the environmental crisis, then there's the possibility of an actual revolution for the emancipation of all of humanity. And that's a very big deal.
Here, I wanted to ask a little bit more about actually some of what we heard in the opening from BA, where he says, I'm gonna speak the truth very bluntly. Some of it is gonna be bound to offend some people, but he doesn't do it to offend people.
People are not blank slates. People need to be struggled with. This talk wages that struggle.
Mm-hmm.
All this wokester stuff, all these people walking around woke, all this identity politics, all this you can't touch the black church, you can't say anything about religion among the oppressed, you can't go against the way women are commodifying themselves in some cases and claiming it's empowering and liberating. And all this and more, because why? Because to settle accounts? No, this is done from the standpoint of what is standing between masses of people and revolution. It is true people have to see the way forward, but it can't just be going to people with that way forward. With part of the roadmap is actually, what do you struggle with people about, and how do you struggle with them in this period? And I think that's something really, there's a tremendous amount of work done in this talk, that it's true what Andy's saying. It builds on work that goes back, that's been a hallmark of BA forever, but it's based on an understanding that people walk around with ways of understanding the world, frameworks for understanding the world that are created by the system, either consciously created by the system or spontaneously generated by the relations in which people are forced to live in a capitalist, imperialist, white supremacist, patriarchal system. And I really want to challenge, again, people to get into this. This is giving a lot of guidance on how to wage that struggle with people, too.
Yeah. BA is on fire in this piece. I mean, and relentless in the best way. One other thing I wanted to touch on from what we heard, and it's how BA opens this talk. He says, let's get to the heart of the matter.
Yeah.
And he cites Martin Luther King. And it's a feeling that's out there among many people that revolution, especially in a country as powerful as this one, would be suicide to attempt a revolution, and especially for Black people.
When he talks about the heart of the matter, let's get to the heart of the matter. Many people, including someone like Martin Luther King, have argued that attempting to carry out a revolutionary overthrow would be suicidal. And you do hear that. I mean, that does sit like a weight on people who are actually confronting the situation, who are truly confronting it and not just looking at, well, we just have to prepare for a period of regression, or, some of the outs that you're pointing to that people take. And again, the fact that he, in this talk, calls that out at the beginning and proceeds to answer that question, the heart of the matter in this talk is something of great, great importance. It's a big weight, potentially, again, what Andy's saying, depending on what we do with this, that can actually unleash a lot of things. It's not there's a whole roadmap that encompasses struggling with how people think, that encompasses leading people to struggle against what the capitalist imperialists are doing, and not just the fascists, although including the fascists.
What all of those dimensions are they should be invitations into, really the whole purpose of us talking about this here today is an invitation to you to get into this work yourself. He's talking about overthrow. In this being a time when that could be ripened and potentially won. Andy, I know you get hit by this a lot of many different ways. I know right up at Revolution Books, people come in and they think different ideas. Can you say a few words about a real revolution?
We are talking about you have to overthrow this system. And this system of capitalism, imperialism that gives rise to all these things that create so much oppression. You've got to get rid of the system that does this. But then comes the question that this system is enforced with the largest and most powerful military in history, massive police forces, massive judiciary, and mass incarceration. That is not a joke. That is something that in a revolution has to be met and defeated. And there is this basic strategy and framework for that Bob Avakian has developed. In this new piece, he gets into strategically how we could actually go at this by, as Lenny just brought out, struggling very sharply with people about how they think and what they're thinking and the way that they're caught within the framework of the system, including believing this is the greatest country. For all its problems, it's the greatest country. It's an American chauvinism. They don't think about the other 7 billion people on the planet. But more than that, there's a higher level of understanding and synthesis of the process by which we accumulate forces and put up a pole for revolution. There's things that are put together in this talk that have never been put together before in this way, that create that roadmap for how you could actually, how we being the RevComs, together with all of you watching this show and listening to this, and all those who hear about this talk and start reading it and listening to it, hear it about on the radio in different ways and in social media, can begin to go to work on forging an organized force that is impacting millions of people in society, that's garnering thousands of followers of Bob Avakian now, training hundreds of people to be leaders. That this force, in the changing conditions that we're going to be facing and that we're already facing, but it's going to get sharper, that's going to compel people to not only not put up with it, but to actually start wondering, how does this, where is this coming from? Does it have to be this way? Why has it always been this way? If there's people out there with the answers, number one, and number two, with a way to actually change it. And there's a strategy for that that's in this talk that has never been developed before.
Well, I want to ask you, Lenny, before we close out this segment, if there's anything else that you want to leave our viewers with, anything else as a prompt, as an invitation into this talk and into taking up what it lays out.
Every single one of you has a choice to make. You are living in an historic time. You need to read this talk. You need to sit down as soon as you can, put on the audio, read along with it if that's how you process it. But this talk is going to challenge you in the best way possible. It's going to give you an understanding of what has led us to this situation. It's going to speak truth to a lot of things that you might feel are true, but it's going to be undeniable what's brought. It might not be things you want to hear, but it's going to be things you need to hear. He won't spare you on that because he respects everybody too much to do that. And because this cause, the emancipation of all humanity, is too important. There's a roadmap here on how to wage that struggle with other people. There's a roadmap here on how we could actually go do exactly what Andy said just now so that we don't squander an opportunity, or so that we don't just sit around and wait for such an opportunity either. But that we move beginning now, beginning today, to actually transform the situation we face. People, it is true. The hour is late. And not only can we not speak falsely, but we cannot sit and wait. We've got to face the situation. This talk could actually change. The impact that this talk could have on humanity can't be underestimated, but it has to be taken up. It has to be read. It has to be spread, and it has to be applied.
Andy, any final word you want to add?
Well, I just wanted to say first, I'm glad to have Lenny Wolff back on the show with me.
As am I.
That's great. But second thing is, if you think about that, revolution could be possible where you could get rid of a system that has built into it all these things that cause so much hardship, that kill, destroy lives, crush people's spirits, that you could actually get rid of that and emancipate, get on the road to emancipate all of humanity. This is historic. And there's an invitation to you here to get into that and to not flinch from the deepest and most profound and most liberating analysis of all this. And that there's an invitation, but there's also a dare. Dare to struggle and dare to win.
All right, so the title again, Something Terrible or Something Truly Emancipating. Profound crises, deepening divisions, the looming possibility of civil war, and the revolution that is urgently needed. A necessary foundation, a basic roadmap for this revolution by Bob Avakian, revolutionary leader, author of The New Communism, available now at revcom.us. Print it out, listen to it. We're going to continue to get into this. We'll have Lenny back in the future. Andy will stay with us. I want to thank you both for joining us on this first episode since this work has been released. I think it's really important.
Great. Thanks for having me.
On this show, the Revolution Nothing Less show, we put a lot of emphasis on the importance of leadership and of the importance of Bob Avakian's leadership in particular. In the new work, the new talk from BA that Lenny and Andy were just talking about, Bob Avakian is providing crucial leadership for this time. And in the segment we're about to play from Bob Avakian's 2012 speech, BA Speaks, Revolution Nothing Less, BA gets into the importance of leadership and of communist leadership in particular. He breaks down what this is and why it matters so much to getting from the world we're in today to one that is free of exploitation and oppression and all forms of social antagonism. And he gets into the responsibility of leadership. Let's listen.
All this is why we need leadership. And it sets the terms for what kind of leadership is needed. There are profound divisions in this society and in the world as a whole. Divisions between classes, nations, men and women, between those who do intellectual work and those who do physical work, and other major divisions. These contradictions can't just be wished away. We cannot get beyond them by pretending they don't exist, or that they don't have any effect and consequences, or by redefining reality in our minds. This is not just somehow a matter of narratives, of different versions of reality, nor will we get where we need to go by different people and different identity groups insisting on their own narratives in place of and in opposition to confronting and radically transforming the actual reality we are up against and the possibilities for change that lie within this reality. Here I just want to read something from Basics as food for thought. I won't go into it here, but it's something to think about. Maybe it'll come up in the Q&A but it can be pursued and should be pursued beyond that. Basics 410 speaks to this critical point. I'm just going to put it out, food for thought. Why is this so, or is it so? For humanity to advance beyond a state in which might makes right, and where things ultimately come down to raw power relations, will require as a fundamental element in this advance an approach to understanding things, an epistemology which recognizes that reality and truth are objective and do not vary in accordance with nor depend on different narratives, and how much authority an idea or narrative may have behind it, or how much power and force can be wielded on behalf of any particular idea or narrative at any given point. Question is this true? And if so, why is it true that it's important to have this understanding in order for humanity to advance beyond a state in which might makes right and things are reduced to raw power relations? To return to the question of leadership, with which this has a great deal to do, we need leadership with a scientific understanding and a scientific method and approach to guide this struggle through all the complications and difficulties, all the twists and turns to finally overcome all these divisions. And first of all, to lead people to prepare for, and then when the conditions have been brought into being, to wage the all-out revolutionary struggle to bring this monstrosity of a system down and bring into being a new system founded in radically different relations and with radically different institutions and guided by radically different ways of thinking that can establish a whole new foundation from which to carry forward this struggle together with people throughout the globe toward the goal of communism and the end to any and all forms in which one part of humanity enslaves and degrades another part, and in which the functioning of human society leads to the destruction of the natural environment. Where we can get it, we need the collective leadership of a communist vanguard, that core of leadership, and where we have it, we need to take the greatest advantage of outstanding individual leaders who come forward. All this is a precious resource for oppressed people, while at the same time it is a very serious responsibility for those leading people. Without communist leadership, without leadership that bases itself on and proceeds from the most advanced understanding of communist theory and principles, applying the science of communism to lead people while also learning from them, the cold reality is that the most oppressed masses will be kept out and kept down, messed over and dictated over once again. There will be no real revolution and no new society aiming for a whole new world. Here I think of the Rosetta Stone. When Napoleon invaded Egypt a couple of hundred years ago, they discovered, or I guess I should say rediscovered, the Rosetta Stone, which was sort of like a tablet that had a story, I won't say a narrative, had a story written in different languages. On the top were hieroglyphics. Underneath that was Greek, and then what's come to be called Demotic. The hieroglyphics were the language, as it turned out, of the pharaohs and the upper crust of ancient Egypt. The Greek was Greek. And the Demotic was the language of the ordinary people in the Egyptian, in ancient Egypt. They're still apparently working out some aspects of the Demotic. But fairly quickly, they were able to do enough to tell, using the Greek, and then going back and forth between the Greek and the hieroglyphics, that this was the same story being told in these different languages. And it became, as you know, it's a metaphor now, it became a key to opening up all kinds of knowledge. Because the scholars could use the Greek not only to find out what was being said in the hieroglyphic, which turned out it was the same thing as in the Greek, but it opened the key to being able to understand the hieroglyphic written language in a more overall sense. And this opened up all kinds of things which had been previously unknown to people since the time of ancient Egypt. For the masses, especially the most oppressed masses, communism and communist leadership is the Rosetta Stone they need. Reality is very complex. It seems often overwhelming, especially to people struggling just to survive and get through. Tomorrow, your son is shot by the police. The next day, your daughter turns sick and you have no health insurance. Then along comes a movement like Occupy, which says we shouldn't have any leadership. We should have a horizontal organization where everybody can participate equally. Of course, all the real leaders are conspiring behind the scenes. But even leaving that aside and taking that its best interpretation, the problem is you're a woman in Brooklyn in a housing project or in Harlem dealing with the lives of 10 people that depend on you, children and grandmas and all kinds of other people, trying to keep all this together and keep everybody alive and out of trouble. You hear about the Occupy thing, it's difficult for you to even go down there. And then if you get down there, they can do the nice mic checks and everything else. But you're going to be overwhelmed by what they're talking about. You have no experience in this whole thing. You are in the company of graduate students from elite Ivy League universities who have a familiarity and are conversant with all this political discourse. You have things to say and people may even listen to you. But despite the declarations that everybody's going to participate equally, do you really think that this person, this woman coming down from Harlem, is going to be able to join in an effective way on the same basis of people who have a great running head start in their whole lives and in their college and graduate school educations? And furthermore, we have the problem that not only is there the ruling class, but there are these people out of the middle class who bring faulty Greek to the translation of the Rosetta Stone, who present, according to their own prejudices and their own distortions and their own misunderstandings, a false understanding and vision of reality and impose that over reality. And so if you're one of the basic people trying to swim in all this, without the leadership that enables you to penetrate beneath the surface and understand the different parts of reality, without the Rosetta Stone of communism and communist leadership, you're going to be shut down. You're going to be discouraged from even trying to take part after a short time. You're not going to be able to play a conscious role in shaping the development of this movement and more broadly the struggle. The Rosetta Stone opens up all kinds of avenues and possibilities for knowledge. Communism and communist leadership provides the means for masses of people to penetrate beneath the reality, to fight through the seemingly overwhelming difficulty of understanding these things and finding the links and the interconnection and the patterns of things, and to be able to consciously act to change the world on that basis. But with this Rosetta Stone of communism and communist leadership, the masses can not only become active fighters to change the world, but they can increasingly themselves become scholars of the language of changing the world. And this is what the masses of people need, and we're not going to let anyone with their distorted translations tell us that we should not be giving the masses of people the opportunity to have this leadership.
That was Bob Avakian, again from his 2012 speech, BA Speaks Revolution, Nothing Less. And let me just say, to have this leader at this time means everything. And it puts a tremendous responsibility on all of us to get with this leadership, to learn from it, to apply it, and to defend it with everything we've got. This is always true, and it is doubly true at a time like this. So I just want to echo before moving forward what Lenny and Andy said earlier about getting your hands on, listening to this new work from Bob Avakian that just came out this week. Get into it deeply, spread it, dig into it, and work with us to apply it and change the world on this basis. So with that, I want to ask Andy to take a moment and tell you about our holiday schedule. We're reaching the end of the season. Andy?
This is our last episode of season 2, but we have something special coming for the next 3 weeks. On the 23rd of December, we're going to show a film that we made of an article that appeared on revcom.us, BA for the Liberation of Black People and the Emancipation of All Humanity. This is an incredible piece, and it's an incredible short film. That will be our main thing that we show on the 23rd of December, right before Christmas. Then during the Christmas, New Year's holiday week on December 30th, we're going to show part 1 of why we need an actual revolution and how we could really make revolution. And this is important for going into the material basis for why we need a revolution, which should deepen your understanding of what comes in this new talk that we just spoke of in the show, Something Terrible or Something Truly Emancipating. Then the following week, on January 6th, we're going to see part 2 of the same film that features and focuses on how we could really make a revolution. And we'll answer some of those and speak to some of the strategic questions when it actually comes time to make the revolution. So that film, both parts, is very important for everything that you're going to be studying and discussing and getting into in the new piece. And then on January 13th will be the beginning of season 3 of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. So we wanted to let you know about this, our schedule. And now we have a few more things coming up before our final segment.
That's right. Before we go into the interview on abortion, which we'll tell you more about in a minute, we wanted to share a few things off social media. One is a really very internationalist skit, and very funny too, by a comedian, Karan Menon, dealing with the vaccine apartheid. So we'll show that. It's not long, but it's very sharp, and we enjoyed it. We know you will too. Then we're going to follow that immediately by a short clip that our social media team made, a TikTok of Andy from his commentary on Thanksgiving, really exposing the genocidal roots of this country and that holiday, and some of the TikTok duets, the response videos, that this really took off, and a lot of people appreciated it, and we want to share some of that with you. And then finally, a quick piece you're going to hear from Noche Diaz and Joe Veal, who really are on a mission to make a big deal about a recent article from Bob Avakian dealing with the Nation of Islam and all the harm that they do in messing up people's thinking and pointing them in the wrong direction. And Noche Diaz, Joe Veal, and Carl Dix are going to be on a mission to really go out and contend with this. You'll hear a little bit of an opening salvo from them. So we'll bring you these short 3 videos, and then we'll jump back into the rest of the episode.
Hey.
Oh, what's good?
I think the house is on fire.
Oh yeah, I know. I just put it out in this room.
Okay, well, it's still happening in the rest of the house.
Oh, word?
Could I use that water?
No.
What do you mean no? It's literally just sitting there.
The thing is, like, I made this water. Like, it's a special formula that works on different types of fires. Like, it's Fiji.
Yeah, but you're hoarding way more than you actually need, and I barely have any water.
I mean, I could sell you some.
Okay.
For 3 times the normal price.
What? That is so much money.
Do you want it or not?
Yeah, no, I want it.
Okay, here it comes.
Why is it not?
We're experiencing delays of several months.
Several months?
Oh yeah, go for it. Thanks.
Did that guy just take my water?
Well, yeah, it was getting delayed.
Look, could you just like share the formula with me so I could make the Fiji water myself?
I don't know if that's legal, bro. Like, that's intellectual property.
There's a fire in the living room. Like, people could die.
Well, this guy actually produces most of the water.
What's up?
So,
What do you think? Should we give him the formulas or?
I mean, I'm not against it.
Okay.
I am.
And I do have the power to do it in times of emergency.
Yeah, and this is an emergency.
So are you?
No.
Okay, listen, bro. Like the fire is spreading really quickly now. Like I think it's mutating. Like I need water right now.
Well, we gotta look out for ourselves first, you know?
We live in the same house.
You know what? You're right. You're banned from this room.
Okay, Jesus.
Last week, I referred to Thanksgiving as Genocide Day. Just one generation after the first Thanksgiving, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts issued an official government order putting a price on the scalps of Indigenous children, women, and men. The reward was about $12,000 in today's dollars for the scalp of a man, half that for a woman, and a bit less for a child. And it was nearly as much as a soldier would earn in 2 years, and sometimes bounty hunters were granted the land of the people they scalped. This is not a day to give thanks for a country that was founded on the most brutal genocide.
What's up, y'all? I'm No Che. I'm here with Joe. We got something for you.
It's a very important article that's Bob Avakian, the revolutionary leader, the author of the new Communism, has just released The Nation of Islam, not a force for, a force against emancipation. We need revolution. And he breaks down, clearly breaks it down for everybody, how the Nation of Islam and their whole doctrine and belief system is just a creationist myth, a fairy tale, some made up bullshit. And people will never be able to get free by taking up that shit. What people like need is Bob Avakian. They need his leadership. They need his method and approach of the new communism in order to be able to deal with reality, how it really is, so we can get rid of this capitalist imperialist system with white supremacy deep down in its bowels.
Go to revcom.us and find this article from Bob Avakian and the other works and leadership he's providing. And here it is from the beginning of that article. He says, Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam, which he is the head, pose as angry and powerful opponents of white supremacy. But the truth is that neither the doctrine of the Nation of Islam nor its actions represent the road to ending white supremacy and liberating black people or anyone else. And I think about all the people who are beaten down and broken down, locked up in this system. We're looking for answers to why, and they encounter all this fantastical nonsense that keeps them looking to the sky for some never-coming salvation instead of lifting their heads to a real-world emancipation.
In the days since the fascist majority on the Supreme Court showed their fangs on December 1st, making clear to the world that they are poised and likely eager to gut abortion rights nationally, possibly even overturning the landmark RoeVWade decision of 1973, many voices and commentators have been adjusting to this loss of abortion rights in advance and even downplaying the danger that this will pose to women. This made one of the headlines of our next guest stand out all the more, not only ring true, but stand out. She wrote, "We're not going back to before Roe. We're headed somewhere worse." And we're really happy to talk with her about this and much more of what's at stake right now with these Supreme Court cases. Dahlia Lithwick is a writer for Slate.com. She covers the courts and the law, and she is also the host of the podcast, Amicus. Dahlia, welcome back to the Revolution Nothing Less show. We're so happy to have you with us.
Thank you for having me back. And yes, things have gotten grimmer since last we spoke.
Yeah. Well, I want to start with that title. We're not going back pre-Roe, we're going somewhere worse. And just for people who are not familiar, younger people and others, we shouldn't downplay the horror of what it was for women pre-Roe v. Wade. Millions and millions of women had their lives foreclosed by pregnancies and children they didn't want. They were forced into marriages, many of them in suffocating conditions or even abusive. Thousands of women died for lack of safe legal abortion. I interviewed the novelist and poet Marge Piercy years ago, and she described her best friend who died from an illegal abortion and put it very poignantly. She said it was a time when falling in love could kill you. And so with that in mind, which I think you're very familiar with what the real stakes were, you say we're going to something far worse. And I would love it if you could explain why you say that.
So, Sunsara, I'm so glad you start with not soft pedaling how bad it was pre-Roe, because I think that we have this sort of sepia tone memory. Maybe it wasn't so terrible, right? And so no one wants to diminish how truly awful it was pre-1973. But the thing that I wanted to get at in this piece is that even pre-1973, when you had a patchwork of laws operative in different states, and it was really tricky and confusing and terrifying, as you say, to try to terminate a pregnancy. The thing that we are looking at now with this Supreme Court and with the project of fetal personhood, which is a theological idea that the minute you have a fertilized egg, you have a person. We have Justice Sam Alito asking questions about, doesn't the fetus have rights? You have this really urgent, pressing need on the part of a pro-life community that isn't just about fetal personhood, but is about doing away with certain abortion-causing drugs that they say also ends life. So that to set the stage, I guess I would just say all of that was not the issue when we were talking not you and I, but in the 60s and 70s about the movement that opposed abortion. First of all, the organized church was not a big player in this. That happened after Roe and as a result of Roe. But that the idea that we are going to set the time marker back to sweep in not just abortion, all abortion, no exceptions for rape and incest, the health of the mother, but to sweep in contraception, to sweep in vitro, to sweep in surrogacy. That's the project now. And I just think that if we don't see that as the stakes, then we are missing where this is going. And that's what is, to me, chilling is, I guess, and I put this in the piece, at least in Roe, there was a notion that, and if you read Justice Blackmun's opinion in Roe, the right is between a woman and her doctor, and it's always a male doctor, and that's what he talks about. And he mentions doctors as much as he mentions women. But women were considered sort of infants in their own right. And so you had to help them. And that's what the doctor was there for. That's gone now. And we are seeing a regime of criminalizing miscarriage, of criminalizing drug use while pregnant. So I guess I just want to really unspool the whole parade of horribles, which is not what life was like pre-Roe.
You talk about fetal personhood, and I think it's important that you note that's a theocratic concept. That's not... there's no basis for that argument outside of religion. And yet it's being talked about, it's being normalized. And I think maybe you could talk about how sweeping and radical the impact of enshrining full rights to a fetus, an embryo, a blastocyst, what that would actually mean.
As to the sort of scope of how broad this notion of fetal personhood could be, I described in my piece two professors who filed an amicus brief in this case where they were really urging that fetal personhood, as you said, starts with a fetal embryo. But I think the scope of what they are arguing for in this amicus brief, which is, again, completely laced with theological principles, is a world in which every time a pregnancy ends, a mother could be criminally prosecuted. It feels like we are sliding inexorably into something that looks a lot like The Handmaid's Tale, and I don't use that lightly, where the mother as incubator, who has less rights than the quote unquote person in her womb, is the world that they are positing as the next step. And if listeners haven't followed this really, I think, shocking case out of Oklahoma, where a young woman, Brittany Pula, who was 19 years old, went to a hospital suffering a miscarriage and was, first of all, held for a year pending trial. And then after a very, very brief trial, sentenced to 4 years in prison for manslaughter because she used drugs while pregnant. I think that really highlights the double-edged sword here, where now it's not, you endangered your child, but you were a child yourself. It's that you go to jail now because you miscarried. And I think that's just such a far cry from the world pre-Roe.
I want to shift to some of what's happening with the ban in Texas. Viewers should be familiar with SB 8, the 6-week, the most radical abortion ban that is currently now 3 months on the books. Women in Texas have not been able to access abortion after 6 weeks, which is way before most women know they're pregnant. There's no exception for rape and incest. And part of the double threat of this law is that not only is it cutting off this foundational right of women, it is enforced by vigilante bounty hunters. And so this has been a way, it was written in such a way as to try to insulate the law from any challenge in court. And so recently the Supreme Court heard this again to consider whether to allow any challenges to go forward to this law. And without getting totally into the weeds on what they're going to allow, what they're not going to allow, they cut off a lot of avenues for challenging this law. And I want to ask you about that, but I also want to bring in, it was a very radically divided Supreme Court in responding to this. And in her response, Justice Sotomayor compared this law and what it's doing to John C. Calhoun, who was, as she puts it, a virulent slaveholder, a defender of the slave system, and a defender of the idea that fundamental rights should be left up to the states. And I just think there's a very strong comparison she's making. She actually writes, the nation fought a civil war over that proposition. And I'd like to hear what you think the significance of that is.
So I think I would start from this place. In the course of a week and a half, the court heard both the Dobbs argument that you and I were discussing, that's the Mississippi 15-week ban, and issued the decision in that Texas SB 8 case. If you read the Justice Gorsuch opinion for the court in SB 8, the word woman and women appears once. Other than the title of the case, which is Whole Women's Health, so it's on every page. But other than the title of the case, the word woman appears once, and it's quoting the statute. It's quoting SB 8. So, in fact, the word women appears 0 times in terms of a description of whose rights and interests are at issue. If you read Justice Sotomayor's dissent that you were just citing, you will find the word woman, women, pregnant person, woman, women, pregnant person, which is exactly, by the way, what you may recall Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg did in Hobby Lobby, right? That was the religious liberty case where religious business owners didn't want to give contraception to their employees who were not co-religionists, but who said that every time we afford contraception to our employees, we are triggering an abortion. So again, that's a completely theological argument. And you may recall that Justice Alito, in his majority opinion, allowing them to withhold contraception, used the word women almost not at all. It was Justice, at that time, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, women, 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 pregnant people, pregnant people. So start with the predicate, which is, it would seem as though women and pregnant people are utterly invisible to the majority of the court. They don't even figure. It's not even worth saying the word women to rebut women's claims because they're not even material enough to show up. And I just start from that because it's shocking. And so I think that's the part of my answer. The other part of the answer is the big structural answer, which is SB 8 was designed, as you say, to evade judicial scrutiny because no state actor implements this ban. It's a 6-week ban, as you said, and there's nobody to sue. So the guts of the SB 8 lawsuit was the provider saying, we need to be allowed to sue somebody to enjoin this thing. That's how unconstitutional laws are stopped. And the court allowed this very narrow tunnel for 4 prospective people licensing agents in Texas to be sued. The reason that we have not seen Texas revert to giving post-6-week abortions is that is no protection at all. And that's really the thing that Sotomayor, and by the way, Chief Justice John Roberts, noted hater of abortion rights, joins her on the proposition that this is, in fact, allowing a state to nullify federal constitutional law. And that's the point she's making. And that's why you have the comparison to John Calhoun. Because what she is saying is, if you give states a green light to say, oh, we've got this really clever scheme, stratagem is the word the Chief Justice used, so that no court can review this and set this aside, you are essentially reverting to slaveholders who were nullifying federal law in the name of state sovereignty.
All right. Well, Dahlia, I want to thank you so much for making the time again to come join us here on the Revolution Nothing Less show.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
So to move us towards a conclusion of this episode, we want to share with you an excerpt from a national fundraising live stream that was hosted here on our channel, the RevCom's YouTube channel, last weekend. It was a fundraiser for the National Get Organized for an Actual Revolution tour. During this live stream, a number of members of the tour from very different backgrounds, different experiences, spoke from the heart very compellingly about how they met the revolution and the impact Bob Avakian's leadership has had on them and on transforming them, including a lot of the struggle they had to go through. And it was a very compelling part of this live stream. We have it on our channel. You can go watch it in its entirety. But we want to bring you one excerpt from this, from Michelle Xai. She's a leader in the Los Angeles Revolution Club. She's a member of the National Revolution Tour. And she's speaking about this moment and the responsibility each of us have in a particular way. Let's listen.
I just want to start by saying I'm very moved by everybody's stories. I've heard people talking about it, but just kind of, the process and the transformation that people have gone through, I think is really important and really inspiring, and I just really appreciate what Luna was saying, because it is, my story is very different, because I didn't actually have a path in my life. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. All I knew at that point when I met the revolution was that I needed to stay alive and I needed to stay out of jail, because I was seeing everybody around me, either going in and out of jail, people dying, people shooting up each other, chasing people down the street because of the gang shit, But I want to fast forward to now, because now I'm a leader in this revolution, in the local revolution club. And there was a lot of transformation that I had to go through, and a lot of struggle and a lot of fighting through on different things, right? I had to break with nationalism and religion and among a lot of shit, that I was caught up in. But through listening to this new talk and the moment that we're in, right? This challenge that there is to those people that right now don't even know about this revolution and need to step into it, but also to those of us that have been a part of this revolution, right? Who, we get to the point where, like I said, all of these things that I came to learn about this country, slavery, Jim Crow, all of these things, that when Trump got into office, when Trump was elected, I sat on the edge of my bed and I just cried because I thought all of my biggest fears, everything that I've learned about, that I've come to learn about the history of this country, the ugliness of, Black people being hunted down and fucking, murdered. All of this was gonna become reality, but on a whole, in a whole nother way, and all of my nightmares were going to come a reality, and here we are now in a situation where there is a lot of talk about a civil war, and a lot of people can get very sucked into and lost in all of the nightmare part of that, which of course we can't ignore, and we can't say, okay, we're not going to talk about that. But what is actually concentrated in this new talk and what BA actually is going into is the possibility of something very liberating, you know. And once I had to fight through on actually like, no, you got to confront this. No, you got to actually like fight through to understand what's in it and take responsibility to actually wrench that positive side out of this, you know? And that takes like a whole nother rupture of like, no, there is no going back to normal. Normal was never good, but you're not going to be able to just go about and live your life and fuck around and do whatever, or just stay in the level of like contributing to this revolution as I've been, but actually taking a whole nother level of responsibility, you know, because the times demand of it are screaming for this kind of, you know, for people like us that are sitting here, you know, to actually go out and fight for this, you know, to apply what's in that talk, to actually struggle like hell with people that are just like us a few years ago, you know, that have that potential to actually transform, to get out of a lot of bullshit that they're caught up in, you know, just like Chantel was saying, you know, trying to get a job, trying to get a raise, this and that. And then you come to confront, what the fuck am I thinking about, you know, and that, you know, I'm saying that all to say that that transformation, that struggle doesn't end once you put on the shirt, you know, it continues. And as the times, you know, get heavier and as things, you know, continue to develop, it's there and we have to continue to fight through. But just like Chantel said, at the core of all of that struggle, BA's leadership has been so crucial to that. I wouldn't be sitting here a leader in this revolution if it wasn't for Bob Avakian. And the way, you know, I thought what Lenny was saying about he doesn't lose sight of, you know, struggling with, you know, those most oppressed, not because he's trying to be like, oh, you poor thing, but because he actually sees the potential in people to rupture out of shit that they're caught up in. That's the same system that's like training people, you know, that I fucking internalized for so long that I was stupid and that I couldn't like amount to anything, you know, like, and breaking with that shit. Why? Because you know, because humanity is demanding of it, you know, and because BA sees, you know, what's in that new talk, you know, and he does speak in this new talk about the hopelessness that a lot of people feel, you know, like a lot of people like me 10 years ago, you know, feeling hopeless, not seeing a path within all of this and just trying to get their anger out on each other or however it is that people are caught up in. This is what your funds are going to, you know, this is, you know, the people that are continuing to have this transformation, that are continuing to struggle through things, that are fighting like all hell to apply what's in that new talk and going out and trying new things and, you know, and experimenting, but all really clearly in mind, we got to make this revolution. We got to bring forward hundreds of trained leaders in this moment, hundreds of Michelles, hundreds of Lunas, hundreds of Atlases, you know, all these people here, you know, like, of course, they're not going to be just like us. They're going to be very different. Right. But the potential is there, you know, and I think that what really brought forward in these stories is the fact that we didn't come out of the womb going, oh, we're communists, you know, we were caught up in all kinds of shit, you know, and meeting the revolution. And where would our lives be right now if we would have not had, you know, gotten into the leadership of BA? We wouldn't have gone through those transformations, you know, like what, you know, I'm not just trying to hype us all, you know, that are sitting here, but our lives are actually, you know, what we're doing with our lives and what we're dedicating our lives to is the most important thing that anybody can be dedicating their lives to, you know. And that doesn't happen from, okay, today I met the revolution and tomorrow I'm going to be like Michelle, you know, like it takes transformation, but we don't have all the time in the world. We have to accelerate that process, you know. We don't have 10 years, like as long as it took me, you know. So this is what your funds are going to, you know, this is what to you know, as Pro said, you know, to go and struggle with those people that are out there right now caught up in a lot of bullshit to actually get with this revolution.
All right, so before we close out this final episode of season 2 of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show, I want to echo what you just heard from Michelle. Dig deep, donate generously to the Revolution Tour, to the Movement for Revolution, to getting this new work from Bob Avakian out everywhere, boldly into society, and in reaching the people to take it up and act on it. We just what you heard from Michelle was part of a very successful, important live stream fundraiser we had last weekend. We raised over $22,000. I want to thank everybody who donated. It makes a huge difference, but this is just the beginning of the funds that are needed. So to close out, for myself, I want to ask you again to give generously, to go and be part of raising the funds that are needed to take this forward. Andy?
Well, this is our last episode on the second season, and I think the show has matured, and now it's as we enter the holiday season and we get ready for the third season, it comes to you, the audience. We really value the hundreds and thousands who have watched the show, but we want to say that the audience needs to grow geometrically in the next period, because this is a rare time when revolution becomes possible. And thousands and thousands and tens of thousands need to see this show. We want you to send your impressions, your criticisms, your what you liked about the show. Write to us over the holidays at therevcoms@gmail.com, and then tune in on January 13th for the third season. And between now and then, watch the films from Bob Avakian and about Bob Avakian that we're going to be showing over the holiday period. So
into this. And get into the new work, RevCom.us, the new work.
Yeah, something terrible or something truly emancipating. That's something to celebrate on New Year's and to look forward to, and something to commit yourself to. So I just want to say that I've appreciated the last year of working with you on this show, Sunsara, and as we go forward into 2022 and really getting serious and getting down on making good on what we have said needs to and can be done. So for me, from New York City, from Revolution Books in Harlem, I'll see you next year.